Yeah, absolutely.
The HSA podcast. I have Kyle Neddenriep, who has a rich basketball history in Indiana. I don't know if he knows this. I'm going to gas him up a little bit, and I'm going to tell a little bit about him. But he's kind of the mecca. When he's in the room, people know they better be on the P's and Q's. I've been in a couple opportunities to coach, and he's walked in the gym, and everyone puckers up, and they're on their top game, and I see him out of the corner of my eye, and I know I could get away with saying a lot more because I know that the players are going to be a little yes sir, no sir. But in the bottom line, works for the Indy Star, covers all the high school sports, especially basketball, and you have a very big influence in the game of basketball. And first off, I appreciate you being on the podcast.
Yeah.
Everything we're going to talk about, I appreciate your time, and I want to be respectful of that. But if you don't mind stepping back, you were born in Illinois, I believe.
I was actually born in Nebraska City,
Okay.
Nebraska, and then lived in Missouri for a long time, and then came here. It's been almost 20 years ago now, so it's been a while.
And how did you get into the position that you're in now? Like, obviously, you carry a lot of weight with your name, and that's how do I say it? A reward for the progress of the hard work you've done, and you've been professional. But how did you get to that point?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I don't know if that's true, but I appreciate you saying that. But yeah, when I went to school, I went to Missouri State University, and I was lucky enough to cover Jackie Stiles, who was the all-time leading scorer in women's basketball for quite a while. So that was my first beat in college, was covering her teams. They were drawing 8,000 people per home game at that time, and I know. Women's basketball's taken it to another level now, but even back then, man, it was awesome. They ended up going to the Final Four. I was out of college at that point, but 2001 they made the Final Four. It was great. It was awesome. But that's kind of how I got started. Was in college. I was writing in college, covering that team. Of course, many other sports too. And then I worked at the daily paper in Springfield, Missouri, for probably the last year and a half I was in college. So I always tell people, like, I was not a great student. I didn't get great grades, but I worked getting that daily newspaper experience when I was in school. That was almost like an on-the-job training. I would taking phone calls from, hey, I got 4 games at a whatever tournament in Southwest Missouri, and I was typing up, doing the agate pages and all that stuff. And I just worked. Friday, Saturday nights, I always worked. Sunday nights, I worked. I ended up putting out the paper on Sunday nights, the sports section, and even when I was still in college. So that was just great on-the-job experience. So about 7 years of working there, we had 1 child already. We needed to get to a bigger city. So my wife and I both were kind of looking at that point. We're probably looking more to like St. Louis, where she's from. Both found something here in Indianapolis, which worked out great.
Yeah,
and we loved it ever since. So that's kind of how I got to here, and then. I got the job being the high school sports writer right away, and I just loved it. I've had opportunities to do other things. I have wanted to stay here and do what I do. I love covering high schools. It's what I did when I was in Springfield to start out with. I covered colleges for a couple of years.
But you found your passion. Like, you got to bounce around a little bit and flirt.
Yeah, and I've got kids, so being kind of anchored at home where I'm not traveling around the country or covering a pro beat, it fits me. And I like covering, I love high school basketball and other sports too, but especially basketball. And it just, being in Indiana, there's nothing better to me than doing that job. So I feel very lucky. So I definitely try to take my job seriously because I am appreciative of even being in this position. So I try to do it until I'm done doing it. I want to do it the best that I can. And I don't always feel like I do that, but I try to do that every day.
No, I mean, you don't get to the position in Indiana. I'm from Florida, and I moved up here for basketball. So it's one of those, like, I get it. This is the Mecca, and that's the stuff I talk about. So you moved up here 2000.
It was about 2007, I believe, or 2008. Early 2008 is when I got here.
And let's go through your pedigree of the people that you covered. So 2007, who was the first player that you were like, this is the guy I need to start following, or girl?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably right around. Deshaun Thomas was starting to become kind of the big deal out of Fort Wayne, of course. Covered him a lot when he first got here. The Zeller brothers were really big at that time. I loved covering Cody, mostly Cody, but I got to know Luke, and kind of after his career was over a little bit. And So the Zeller family, they were outstanding, obviously. And then, shortly after that, it was like, you had the Marcus Teague, Yogi Ferrell, and that's kind of the Gary Harris. That class was the 2012 class was excellent. And I got to cover those guys. Then Trey Lyles came shortly after that, and then Trayvon Blewett was in that same class. That was another great class. So kind of right away, I was like, man, there's a lot of really good players and teams to cover. But yeah, I'd say I was still kind of getting my feet wet. That was right when Gordon Hayward from Brownsburg had won the state championship with Julian Mavunga. I didn't cover that team, but it was right after that when I kind of got started. So the '09 class, which that was like Van Treese and Colt Ryan, I think was Jordy Holes was in that class. I got to cover his teams.
You're saying some pretty
yeah,
like,
yeah. D Davis was another one from. He was a couple years younger, but Bloomington South, they had really good teams at that time. But yeah, those were some really good classes.
so this is the beautiful part about you is you kind of get to be on the fence where you're not necessarily public, but you're not on the team. Like you're kind of that go between. And so we were talking about this off camera a little bit, but you kind of get to see who players are, who they really are in their true aspects. Do you notice anything that, and I want to say the Indiana All-Star historic greats, I don't want to say NBA greats because, you have someone like Greg Oden, who Indiana All-Star, collegiate All-Star, college Hall of Fame, and then he gets to the NBA. But like, there's a common thread there. What was something that you would notice that you picked up on the greats? What is it? But how do you know what it is, and how do you know if they have it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the talent level's got to be outstanding, and that's kind of of course, type of a thing. But you can, having been around it enough, I think I can see that even when they're in high school. If that guy's got a chance to go on and really be a great. I remember watching Kyle Guy play, and I'm like, man, and as great as he was outstanding. Obviously, went on to Virginia and had an outstanding career. Could have gone on, I think, and probably he's one of those guys that, like, if he had a chance with the right team, I think he might be in the NBA right now.
Oh, absolutely.
He decided to go a different path right now, and he was playing at a high level overseas. But I used him as an example because I remember watching him as like, this guy's, he's got something, to him. I watched Trey Lyles when he was in junior high still, and it's like, I see the talent level now. But then you see the behind the scenes things, and I saw what Trey did behind the scenes. Went through a lot of his workouts and stuff, and you saw the work ethic that they had, and that's just such a big. I would say for any kids who might be watching this, that's. I'm not saying you would ever get to that level because you got to have the talent levels got to be to a certain extent. But if you even want to play for your high school team, and maybe you're not as gifted athletically. I mean, you just got to put the work in, whether that's going down to your basement and just doing ball handling drills on your own. It's got to be self. I would say that's a big thing too. Is you can't be told to do stuff all the time. You can't be. It's got to come from within you to want to go do that stuff on your own, and that's what separates me. Even like the guys who play at a 4A level in high school, those guys have to be doing that. I mean, you can't be told to do that stuff. Eventually, that's going to kind of come out, and you just have to do it. I mean, that's going to separate you.
It's crazy you say that because that's as a player development coach and doing all the things we're doing right in the business. I'm always trying to figure out like what makes this player great and this same player in the same age, same situation, not great. And a lot of it comes down to you have to want it. It can't be your parents, it can't be your mom, it can't be your dad, it can't be your coach. You have to want it. Right now, we're kind of in I would say the spotlight of Braylon Mullins. I know you're covering him a lot. Like, what are some of the greatness things that you're picking up on him that he's doing? And let's say this: if you were to talk to a fifth grader, if you want to be like Braylon Mullins because he's the one in the spotlight right now, what would you have to do to be Braylon Mullins at fifth grade?
Yeah, Braylon's a good example, I think, because he, you watch him, and I always feel like too, like you're not born a great shooter. I think that's something too that it's like you're not just like, all right, we've anointed you to be a great shooter. Braylon Mullins wasn't. Granted, he has good genetics. His dad played at a high level. He was a great player in high school and went on. And he plays a college player. And that doesn't always, you don't always have those type of genetics. But Braylon didn't come just right away he was automatically a great shooter. He's put the work in, and I will say too, like, the first thing I noticed about Braylon was not even his shooting; it was his athleticism, his ability to see the floor. So there's a lot of things too. So you kind of get labeled. He's a shooter, and I see that a lot with him. But I'm like, man, he's just a really good player, and he has great instincts. And he's played a lot, and you can tell that. And he plays, on his own. He's a guy again who's self motivated. And I think if you want to be the next Braylon Mullins, again, genetics are going to play a factor with that. But if you want to be your own Braylon Mullins or your own, playing up to the highest level of your ability, that's got to come, from things he does that are outside of like, all right, I'm going to go train for an hour. You don't just put that away and say, all right, that's enough. And I will say too, I think I know you didn't really ask this, but for kids who they need a break too. And I will say that's an important thing. I think that parents need to realize too, is you can only push so far, and maybe it's just, doing something for 20 minutes and then putting it away for a while, and I think that's important too, is you don't just want to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. You got to pull back sometimes and let the kid lead, and I think that's an important thing too. That's probably something Josh Mullins, if he was sitting in here, would tell you too, is I think that's something maybe he's learned with Braylon too, is like sometimes you got to pull back and let them sort of lead the way on those things.
That's all. Like, so, wow. First off, you said a lot there to unpack. Like that was not an easy. That was phenomenal. That was exactly what we needed to hear. But even talking about the break, I heard this from Calipari. He was saying, "Hey, you know what? If you're struggling shooting, don't go shoot for an hour. And what you do is you shoot for 15 minutes, and then when you get frustrated, you put it away. And then the next day you shoot for 16 minutes. The second you get frustrated, you put it away. And then you shoot for 20 minutes. The second you get frustrated, put it away. But if you shoot for an hour and you pass yourself of exhaustion with frustration, you're not going to want to do it the next day. And okay, so yeah, I did it for an hour on Monday, but then I didn't do it again. However, if I did it on Monday for 15, 20 minutes on Tuesday, 30 minutes on, then at the end of the week, you look at it, instead of that 1 hour, you've now gone 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot to be said about knowing when to push that frustration and when not to. At what age would you recommend allowing a player to play? This is what I tell people, and it's a loaded question. I'm going to give you my perspective and then ask yours. I have a lot of parents that come here and say, hey, when do I challenge versus when do I not? When is burnout there? And my response to them is, you'll know when a player's burnt out when they don't want to do it. Like I tell people, if your player wants to be here, be here. Like, don't force them to be here. But if they genuinely want to be here shooting, have them come in and shoot. And so what would be your advice with that, as far as, this is where a player should be pushed or not be pushed? Like, what is your signs and symptoms or thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I'm speaking as I have two kids, and they are both different, wildly different as far as their, in a good way. That's the thing I think is you have to learn is how each kid responds as you do training. I'm sure you learn this too, and coaching and everything that we do, as dads or coaches or whatever, you kind of learn like, all right, that's where you kind of have to know the personality of the person you're dealing with, and how much can I push them? How much do they need? Maybe a different kid needs to be kind of just introduced to something, and then they kind of latch onto it. Whereas another kid may be like, you don't even need to introduce. He knows this is going to be something he's going to enjoy. But I think to me, it's like, at the earliest ages, kids I know are playing 4, 5, 6 years old, are playing multiple games and, going up and playing at different places. And some kids love that. And I think a lot of people think that's maybe the right thing to do. But I think you just want to introduce them to the game and then kind of see where it goes from there. And I will say too, like, introduce them at the youngest ages, introduce them to a lot of different things. I mean, don't think you got to pigeonhole them into, basketball or whichever sport. I mean, introduce them to a lot of things that's going to help your athleticism to play different sports and whatnot. But I would say by the time you get to middle school, or even maybe later in elementary, maybe you have a good idea of like, this is what he wants to do or she wants to do. I think you kind of get a sense at that point of maybe what the future looks like. And all right, what work can we put in here that's going to be beneficial in the long run, and what are ask them what their goals are, and maybe they're, and I always think too, like even if the goals of the kid seems unrealistic, you don't want to shoot that down either.
No, yeah.
You want to let them figure out their path, and let them kind of figure out what's doable and what's not. But I think just introducing them really to different things is kind of the best avenue. And I think the age probably depends on the kid in a lot of aspects.
In this right here, when we talk, I don't want you to think we're going to say anything negative about people. I don't want names in this, but just think of a situation where it's kind of on the dark side now of we have a kid, he comes in, he's a freshman, he has a lot of potential, but then something happened, he just burnt out by the freshman, sophomore, senior year, and he ends up just barely making it across the line. And like I said, we're not calling anybody out, but I know you probably have, for every one success story, you probably have a dozen burnout stories. What are some of the things that you saw in the background moving to make that child burn out?
Well, parents, yeah.
Parents, no, this is really. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think maybe that's where you're heading with that question. But it's such a tough thing, and I know, again, as a parent, it's hard to be a parent, and it's hard to separate yourself from looking out for your kid, pushing them, and also just, and I probably go to the extreme is I want my kids to be coached. I want to support them from behind the scenes. And I'm not saying I do, I definitely don't do everything right. I'm learning on the fly like everybody else does. So, I'm not always the example probably, but I think from following this, a lot, it's the, and if you could walk into any building where there's AAU tournaments going on, and the younger kids, the parents of the younger kids are probably the crazier even to watch, but they're in there getting on refs, they're coaching their kids from the sideline, they're and it's just like, man, what are we doing here? And I remember one game I was coaching Indy hoops, and it was at Ben Davis, and Mark James was in the building, and parents on both sides were kind of going crazy, and he's like, I'll kick all these parents out if you want me to, and we'll just finish the game with the kids on the floor. And we didn't end up doing that, but it almost got to that point.
The option was there.
The option was there. It's like, man, I mean, you don't ever want it to get to that level, but as we all know, you see stuff on social media where parents are running on the court and doing stuff, and I think that's where and I don't know if that's necessarily. I think it probably does lead to the kid being burned out, or it's just like, man, it's just, again, it needs to be important to the kid, not to the parents so much. And there are great parents. I know those parents. I think most of them probably have good intentions. They're looking out for. They're trying to look out the best they can for their kids. And any parent is going to be biased towards their kids, and you have to go in kind of understanding that and being understanding of that. But I think that's probably what leads to most of the issues and problems and potentially burnout for the kids. But
something you said though that can correlate with this is that you need rest, and you're talking long-term rest. Okay, you played a 3-month-long season, you need to take a month off, but even the short-term rest of, like, you've been at school all day, then you have a high emotional, a high physical demand of the game, and then you go home and mentally you're still alert because now you have to answer for the game. Compared to, you get done and you get in the car and now that's your time to be, I get to be a son, I get to be a daughter, compared to, why did I turn the ball over in the first quarter? I don't know. Why did I take that shot? What shot are you talking about? And I think what I'm hearing you, not directly saying, but what I heard you kind of correlate in there is, you need some rest. You need time to be a son, a time to be a daughter, a time to be a child, and just say, yeah, I play basketball, but that's not who I am as a person. So
that is a great point. That's something I think about a lot. It's like, for all the coaches our kids have, and I've coached kids, and I will always feel an affection towards the kids I've coached in my life, and I still try to follow them, in whatever they're doing now. But it's like, as a dad, you're going to be their dad until, hopefully forever, however long we live. And their coaches they're only their coaches for a certain amount of time. So you need to keep that in mind. Like, this isn't the end all be all. It's just so important to be their dad, or their mom, or, whichever the case may be. But but though, yeah, those rides home, man. I know it's sort of become sort of something that's talked about a lot, but and it's hard, because you do want to kind of, hey, let's unpack the game immediately and let's dive into it. And they don't really need that.
No,
They've just played it. They need to rest their bodies and their minds, and I think we're all probably guilty of that, as we want to, because we're trying to be helpful. We're trying to.
we think we're being helpful.
We think we're being helpful, but we're not. So, I would say, to that, just ask them, kind of keep it open ended. If they want to talk about it, then that's great. And you say, if you want to talk, let me know.
I do have a personal story about that.
Mm-hmm.
The first son. So I've been doing this 20 years. I own my own facility. I've almost been at the top level. Like, I've been very blessed to have a career that I've had. And so, in other words, I'm saying I should know better.
Yeah.
Start that. And so my first son, my first game, I'm coaching. He won't pass the ball. He's scoring everything, and I'm like, pass the ball. And the second I get in the car, I have one rule with my son. I ask, did you work hard? Did you play hard? Or did you work hard? Did you listen to the coach? Did you have fun? Those are my 3 questions. And everything after that is whatever you want to talk about. And the very first game I ever coached, I ripped my son in the car. And he's 4 or 5 years old. And he knew he had it coming, for the record, but still. And so I put the car in park, or put the car in reverse, and pull out. And you're like, oh God, Paul, you did it. You're not even 24 hours into coaching your own son,
right?
And so, and I broke. And I'm saying that to parents that you're going to mess up. Mm-hmm. You're going to mess up. But what I did after that is I pulled over, got out, looked him in the eye, and I said, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I'm the jerk. And so, with parents, it's not too. If your kid's still playing, you used to have that opportunity to get in there and say, hey, I'm going to be a parent, I'm going to be a dad. But then it's also interesting because, again, going on my coaching career and everything I've been blessed to do, I still don't coach my own son. I have other people around here coach him.
Yeah.
And if he ever wants me to, I happily will. But I just tell people going on what I have a limited time to be a coach, but the word dad is never going to be. I'm always going to be that kid's dad.
Absolutely.
And so you can't play both roles. So I take the coaching hat off. And but yeah, definitely.
And that's the thing too. It's like you learn from that. I've learned from, you make a mistake and then it's like, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. And you might do it right for a while and you may screw up again. And it's okay. I mean, it's going to happen. You need to keep that conversation going with your kids though, and allow them to, feel comfortable, because you don't want them to think, well, he's just going to yell at me all the time. I don't want to. Then they just shut down.
Yeah.
So you don't want that to happen either. But I'm the same way. I did enjoy the time I coached both my kids, but I also was ready to, someone else needs to do that. And I'm more, I'm better off as our relationship, father to son, of not doing that most of the time. But as much as I did enjoy it, I think it was good for our relationship at the time. There comes a time where you need other people to coach them.
Yeah. I mean, and it feels good though. It hurts a little bit to step back from being coach, but at the same time, being able to enjoy your son or your daughter and say, you appreciate them for who they are. But it could also help lead to that not burning out.
Mm-hmm.
You have a safe place, and your parents are supposed to be a safe place.
Yes.
Going back to, let's just say we have a 5th grader watching this, and this is something Gary Harris had. I think you might have reported it, that Gary Harris had a banner on his wall in 1st grade that said, "What did I do today to make the NBA?" If there was a 5th grader, 4th grader, 3rd grader listening to this, what kind of advice would you give them if you're speaking specifically to a kid, to be like, hey, if you want to be an Indiana All-Star, this is what you have to do to accomplish that? What would be your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the self motivation, and at that point, if you're a 5th grader right now, you're probably starting to get an idea. You should have an idea of what hard work is. But you may not even know what that is until you get to high school. Because if you have the right high school coaches, they're going to push you, and they're going to push you mentally and physically. And you may not always like that, and your parents may not always like that, but that's, if they're doing their job, that's what's going to happen. And that's, again, 5th grade right now, you may not fully know what that is, but you should start having some idea of what that means. And putting in work is, it's mentally, it's physically, it's emotionally, you're learning as a kid too at that point too. That's, you're going through a lot of changes in your life, and figuring out who you are as a person. So that's first and foremost. But if you're wanting to be an Indian All-Star, I mean, that's very prestigious, in this state. And a lot of it too is off the floor, doing the right things academically, doing the right things, being a leader, a team leader, which those are things you can do in fifth grade. I mean, those are things you can start to learn right away. Is what leadership means. What, if your coach is telling you to do something, do it. That's not, you don't need to be an NBA All-Star to figure that out. So be coachable. I think that's number one. Coaches are going to like you more if you're going to listen to them, and do the right thing. Do the right thing for your teammates. When you're on the bench, not secluding yourself or sulking, or sometimes I've seen that too. Is like, well, it's little things that sometimes separate you. If you're wanting to be an Indian All-Star, they may only take three guards, or three shooting guards probably. If you're that fourth shooting guard and you're right on the edge, they're going to be looking at you. How does he react when he's coming out of the game? How does he react to his teammates when he's on the bench? Those are just little things that you control. Those aren't things anybody else controls. And I've told people that too before. It's like, because I know Mike Brown, the Indian All-Star director, is looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
That's important stuff. So those are things that I always, there's things out of your control, like how athletic you are sometimes, or how, the situation you're on a certain team may be out of your control sometimes. But those things you do control, taking a charge when the opportunity is there, just diving for a ball when it's, those are things you can do. So again, it may not separate you from being an Indian All-Star for everybody, but if you're on that edge, those are things that do matter, and those are things you can do now and kind of create habits for yourself in the future.
So when you go back, and something that you mentioned is that you had an opportunity to watch a lot of these guys work out. When they're in their workouts, are they trying to challenge themselves, or and there's a little question because I know the answer, but what are they doing to challenge themselves? Like for example, Trevon Blewett. Do you remember? I think it was Alex Young from IUPUI
Mm-hmm.
that had NBA potential.
Mm-hmm.
This was a story we had. Trevon Blewett was playing him, and Alex was getting ready for the NBA, and we played full court 21, and Trevon Blewett ended up beating him 13-21. And so Alec comes up to the kid and comes up to Trevon and goes like, "Hey, what grade are you?" He goes, "Oh, I'm going to be a freshman." He goes, "Oh, a freshman in what college?" He goes, "No, I'm going to be a freshman in high school." And that was an example because Trevon was used to challenging himself to higher people. And I feel like nowadays with the AAU culture and everything we have, you play in a grade level. You may play up a level, but you're definitely not playing 5 years, 6 years up like Trevon was. How are they handling that success? How are they handling the failures? Like, what are they doing? Because I know they challenge themselves, but
Mm-hmm.
what are they doing to challenge themselves, and how do they handle when they do lose?
Yeah, that's well, in Blewett's case, he was the kind of guy, and a lot of guys are like this, where they'll almost like put a chip on their shoulder that doesn't even exist. Like he always is like talking about his haters, or whatever. Even if that doesn't exist, that's kind of how he was able to kind of create some motivation and things like that. I always find, I think Braden Smith was a lot the same way. Like every little slight, whether it's perceived or not, he was looking for it. That's what would motivate him. And you saw it when I mean, shoot, when they won the sectional, he was unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if I've seen that type of a performance in a sectional. And that was amazing what he did for that team. And it wasn't even probably 60% healthy with the foot injury he had, but it was incredible. But I think those are mental things I think you kind of develop over time. I think if you're in workouts and doing training and things, I think like tracking your shooting, or tracking things like, even writing stuff down, like here's what I did today, that way you can kind of, and that's maybe different than what we were just talking about. But those are things I think that, all right, here's what I did today. Here's how I shot today. Maybe I shoot 50 free throws at the end. Track those numbers. Just do stuff that you can compare to previous workouts. I think is important too. I would always, tell my kids to write stuff down. And my older one definitely did that a lot, which I think was helpful. But again, those are those are things they have to kind of do on their own. Those are things I think they develop over time, and whether they track every workout or not, I don't know if that's that important. But getting into those habits of, kind of comparing what you're doing to previous workouts. I've seen guys do that before, and or something that if it's some sort of move or something that you use in a game, going back to that and working on it at full speed in workouts, I think is important too. Like I see some guys kind of go through training and it's like, you can tell they're just going through the motions. I know you've probably seen it a million times, but
Yeah.
it's like you have to, once you start going, it's like you need to make those game like situations and practice at that level. So I think that's important too. Is that's something I've seen before that I think is helpful. And you can see the guys who are the top level, they do that. I mean, they are, I've had a chance to watch, you kind of catch the end of like Pacers workouts and stuff like that. I mean, I know people say sometimes those NBA guys aren't, trying, but it's like, good Lord, their athleticism and their ability is insane. They make it look like they're not trying because they're so good.
Yeah.
I mean, so, but they go full speed. I mean, that's the thing is they're not dogging it out there. So I think that's the thing is just, even if you're putting 20 minutes in, go all out.
100%.
Yeah.
It was interesting because Yogi, when I was at Park Tudor, he had an opportunity to come back and shoot, and he would go do his homework. And Park Tudor's academics they're no joke.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like he was just going through basket weaving. He would practice a full practice, go home, do his homework, and then come back and shoot. And this is something I tell kids: if you watch the first 5 minutes of his shooting and the last 5 minutes of his shooting, the only thing that changed was the sweat on his shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't understand is as the hour went on, he didn't just, he didn't start slacking. It was, no, I'm still going intense for this full hour. And he didn't start there. He started off with 5 minutes, started off with 20, then 30, 40, 50. It grew to an hour. And a lot of times, this is something I've noticed with kids, and you can push back, but I'm also, if people talk to me long enough, they figure out like I stick up for the youth probably way more than I should. Like I always defend the youth. I mean, it's just such a different generation than we've ever had. I was talking to my dad today about it, about he didn't have to monitor video games.
Mm-hmm.
But we had duck hunt. 10 minutes later,
Right.
we were bored and we were outside throwing rocks at each other.
Right.
Like it's just different, the fact that there's just such an unlimited things that kids can do. But I feel that the mental toughness of players today, I don't want to say sensitive, but they seem to take things more personal. Failure seems to hit harder a lot more with kids than it did 10, 15, 20 years ago. I'm not sure why that is, but have you noticed that, or is there any thoughts on that?
I've thought about that, and I think you're right. And I don't know, and I do worry about that some because I think it's just you're hard on yourself, and I do worry because I don't want kids to be that hard on them. So you got to give yourself some relief and allow yourself to grow and not be so dang hard on yourself. And I wonder if I don't know if social media or maybe social isolation in some aspects of we are weirdly more socially isolated in some just because we have so much phones and media things like that. And it can be a mean world. I mean, I see it all the time and not necessarily directed at me. Sometimes it is, but I worry about, and I'm 40 some years old, but kids, I do worry because maybe you're not in the position where you should be criticized like you are. I see sometimes I get tagged on stuff that's directed at more college kids than high school, but sometimes it's high school kids. I'm like, why are you doing that? It's like, I don't get that at all. And I know they're trolls. They're just trolls out there, but it is a different, and I do worry, because they are teenage kids and you're not a fully, adult yet, and you're dealing with all that. And I think that can be hard, but yeah, that is definitely something, because I feel like you should be, it's a time where, gosh, I know I was, still learning at that age and into my 20s. I think
we're in our 40s and hear someone say something about us. It's like, ouch.
It hurts.
We should have the tools in our.
Yeah.
It hurts us as a 40-year-old, and still, not all of it, but there's still some stuff that gets through you, like, but I couldn't imagine everything getting through to a 16, 17-year-old, 15-year-old. Like it's so true what you're saying.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I just, so yeah, I mean, I think it's partly the media. It's partially I know COVID, obviously we went through a lot of that, and I was hoping, as we get out of COVID, maybe these kids who went through all that are mentally tougher in the long run for going through, some of the things we went through at that time, and and continued to in the last couple of years after that. So, hopefully that comes to fruition and makes them more mentally tough. But I do sense, what you're saying, I think is accurate and something I've thought about before, but I don't, I think it's just a lot of different factors that have probably led to that.
I have a theory, and I think that it's probably a percentage, not 100%, but our YouTube, I call it the YouTube culture of you have someone like Dude Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
They make 100-yard, kick it off their head, then it goes off a bike tire, and then ricochets off a wall and then goes in. But what people don't see is the 2,000 tries that failed. They only post the one shot that made it, and I think that a lot of times kids are seeing that, well, he did it perfect. Well, no, you only saw he did it perfect. Well, why am I not perfect like him? Well, because he failed for 2 hours before he got it right for one shot. And so I think that is a part of it, not all of it. Kyle, I know we're coming up to time. I have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
And but I appreciate it. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And for people listening, like, I don't know if you guys have picked up, but he said a lot of there's been a lot of powerful points that I haven't had a chance to stop and drill into, but I hope that you guys go back and listen to this again. You wake up tomorrow, you are named the commissioner of basketball for the United States. Any rule you make, you get to pass one rule, any rule you want. It could go from the NBA. I've had people say a 4-point line, a swish is worth 6. I've had one person say, hey, there should be a biomechanical coach on every team.
Wow.
Or access to that. And you can say anything you want, but this is the new rule that they have to follow for the United States for basketball. What is that rule you're putting in and why?
Man, there's so many things I could think of. Yeah, I think that I actually talked about this recently with this flopping rule that, and I've noticed it with the high school. They've kind of had this rule now, and there has been a rule, but this year it's so you get a warning, then you get a technical foul called on you if you get a second warning, basically.
Yeah.
So I've seen that called a lot this year. And one thing I think in the NBA, it's so hard because these guys are almost like conditioned to trick the refs in some aspects. But I hate the head bob on the dribble. I mean, that if you could tee that up almost every time, I wish that would happen. I don't know if it came from soccer or whatever. All of a sudden, when I was coming up, you never saw that.
No.
You never saw anyone doing that. But that's one thing I can't stand, and I wish there was a way to tee that up immediately and get that out of the game completely. That's probably somewhat of a minor thing. I know there's a lot of things in basketball that probably need fixed more than that. But when I'm watching a game, man, I hate seeing that. So that's one thing I'd like to see.
That's awesome.
If you can get it out of there, I'd love to see it.
I don't know if you're talking about body language. You said flops, and I've been sitting like this. I'm like, what is this? Okay, I got to hear this. Well, Kyle, I would love to have you back on. I thought I think we just scratched it. This is the iceberg. We just saw the tip of all the stuff we could talk about. And I love your energy and your personality. I could probably do this for another 3 or 4 more hours, but I know that you got a day to take on, and I got some stuff I got to do. But I appreciate your time, man. It's been phenomenal. Thank you for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Again, hey, the HSA podcast is Rise Above. We're here. Subscribe. Make sure you check us out. And we're just trying to feed back to the youth and just trying to help you on your basketball journey. So I appreciate it, Kyle. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Paul.